The Lord of Pengerswick. The Lord of Pengerswick came from some eastern climate, bringing with him a foreign lady of great beauty. She was considered by all an outlandish woman. No one beyond the selected servants was ever allowed within the walls of Pengerswick Castle, and they, it was said, were bound by magic spells. No one dared tell of anything that happened within the walls. All was conjecture amongst the neighboring peasantry, miners, and fishermen. Certain it was, they said, that Pengerswick would shut himself up for days together in his chamber. She would burn strange things, which sent their strong odors, not only to every part of the castle, but for miles around the country. Often at night, and especially in stormy weather, Pengerswick was heard for hours together calling up the spirits. He did this by reading from his books in some unknown tongue. On those occasions his voice would roll through the halls louder than the surging waves which beat against the neighboring rocks. The spirits replied like the roar of thunder. Then would all the servants rush in fright from the building. They remained crowded together, even in the most tempestuous night, in one of the open courts. Fearful indeed would be the strife between the man and the demons. It sometimes happened that the spirits were too powerful for the enchanter. He was, however, constantly and carefully watched by his wife. Whenever the strife became too serious, her harp was heard making the softest, the sweetest music. At this the spirits fled, and they were heard passing through the air towards the land's end, moaning like the soughing of a departing storm. The lights would then be extinguished in the enchanter's tower, and all would be peaceful again. The servants would return to their apartments with a feeling of perfect confidence. They feared their master, but their mistress inspired them with love. Lady Pengerswick was never seen beyond the grounds surrounding the castle. She sat all day in lonely state and pride in her tower, the lattice window of her apartment being high on the seaward side. Her voice, accompanying the music of her harp, was rarely heard, but when she warbled the soft love strains of her eastern land, often at early dawn the very fishes of the neighboring bay would raise their heads above the surface of the waters. They were enchanted by the music and the voice. It is said that the mermaids from the Lizard Peninsula in Cornwall and other strange spirits of the waters would come near to Pengerswick Cove. They were drawn by the same influence. On moonlight nights the air is often seemed to be full of sound, yet the lady's voice was seldom louder than that of a warbling bird. On these occasions men have seen thousands of spirits gliding up and down the moonbeams. They floated idly on the silvered waves, listening to, and sometimes softly echoing, the words which Lady Pengerswick sang. Long did this strange pair inhabit this lonely castle. Although the Lord of Pengerswick frequently rode abroad on a most magnificent horse which had the reputation of being of satanic origin, it was at once so docile to its master and so wild to any other person. Yet he made no acquaintance with any of the neighboring gentry. He was feared by all, and yet they respected him for many of the good deeds performed by him. He completely enthralled the giants of the Mount. Before he disappeared from Cornwall, they died, owing, it was said, to grief and want of food. Where the Lord of Pengerswick came from, no one knew. He with his lady with 2 attendants, who never spoke in any but an eastern tongue, which was understood by none around them, made their appearance one winter's day. They were mounted on beautiful horses, evidently from Arabia or some distant land. They soon, having gold in abundance, got possession of a cottage. In a marvelously short time the castle, which yet bears his name, was rebuilt by this lord. Many affirm that the lord by the force of his enchantments, and the lady by the spell of her voice, compelled the spirits of the earth and air to work for them, and that 3 nights were sufficient to rear an enormous pile, of which but one tower now remains. Their coming was sudden and mysterious. Their going was still more so. Years had rolled on, and the people around were familiarized with those strange neighbors, from whom also they derived large profits, since they paid whatsoever price was demanded for any article which they required. One day a stranger was seen in Marizine, whose face was bronzed by long exposure to an eastern sun. No one knew him, and he eluded the anxious inquiries of the numerous gossips. They were especially anxious to learn something of this man, who, it was surmised by everyone, must have some connection with Pengerswick or his lady. Yet no one could assign any reason for such a supposition. Week after week passed by, and the stranger remained in the town, giving no sign. Wonder was on every old woman's lips and expressed in every old man's eyes. But they had to wonder on. One thing, it was said, had been noticed, and this seemed to confirm the suspicions of the people. The stranger wandered out on dark nights spent them, it was thought, on the seashore. Some fishermen said they had seen him seated on the rock at the entrance of the valley of Pengerswick. It was thought that the Lord kept more at home than usual. Of late, no one had heard his incantation songs and sounds. Neither had they heard the harp of the lady. It was an unusually tempestuous and pitch-black night. Even the faint light that usually guides travelers through the darkest countryside was entirely absent, marking the culmination of events. There was a sudden alarm in Marazion, a red glare in the eastern sky. A burst of flames appeared above the hill, and St. Michael's Mount was illuminated in a remarkable manner. Pengerswick Castle was on fire. The servants fled in terror, but neither the Lord nor his lady could be found. From that day to the present, they were lost all. The interior of the castle was entirely destroyed. Not a vestige of furniture, books, or anything belonging to the enchanter could be found. He and everything belonging to him had vanished. And, strange to tell, from that night the bronze stranger was never again seen. The inhabitants of Marazion naturally crowded to the fire. When all was over, they returned to their homes, speculating on the strange occurrences of the night. Two of the oldest people always declared that, when the flames were at the highest, they saw two men and a lady floating in the midst of the fire, and that they ascended from amidst the falling walls, passed through the air like lightning, and disappeared.